Hello, everyone. I'm Katie Pavlich, along with Rosanna Scotto, Harold Ford Jr., Joey Jones, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. A New Jersey mayor arrested after he joined 3 Democratic members of Congress who broke into a New Jersey ICE facility that holds some of the very violent migrant offenders, including an MS-13 gang member. We'll fill you in on that later. But first, the man who destroyed the Democrats. Joe Biden's return to The View was a train wreck for a party that's desperate to move on. At one point, poor Joe was asked about his mental decline and needed Dr. Jill to swoop right in and save him like the Easter Bunny from the ladies of The View.
What is your response to these allegations, or are these sources wrong?
They are wrong. There's nothing to sustain that. And so we went to work and we got it done. And, one of the things
Alyssa, one of the things I think is that the people who wrote those books were not in the White House with us. Mm-hmm. And they didn't see how hard Joe worked every single day. If you look at things today, give me Joe Biden anytime.
Well, the left may be ready to move on, but the stench of Biden's failed 4 years in office still lingers in the air. But some say enough is enough. The Obama pod bros are going nuclear on Sleepy Joe.
He shouldn't have run for a second term. And when he did run for a second term, he should have stepped down much earlier after the debate. And his close advisors shouldn't have told him to run again, and they shouldn't have told him he was going to win.
This media tour is about Joe Biden. It's not about Donald Trump. It's about Joe Biden defending himself and his legacy. He's made it about himself.
Yeah.
And that, I think, was
which he made the last year of his presidency about.
It's not something you're going to solve on The View. And so it's like, step back. If you really truly believe that the work you did was good, then you have to trust history to judge it correctly.
So, Greg, the Bidens go on The View to basically gaslight and say everything was fine still, even though we watched and know it wasn't.
But these guys are talking about 2024. The mistake was 2020. The biggest mistake the Dems ever made was run that guy, picking him and letting himself expose the shallow and useless nature of their party. He will go down as the worst president in history. No question. The party was already a mess, but they picked the worst possible person to front it. It's like Mattel making Casey Anthony their CEO. A disaster. And I think we're letting the media off too lightly. Right now, they're saying, and you can hear it with those guys, hey, it was the White House who kept us from knowing Joe was a mess, as if journalists were under house arrest. It's like the mission of their job, which is actually to report. They can't do that anymore. They only tell the story. But they wouldn't let us. So instead, they have a $1 billion company behind them. They have all the tools needed to tell a story. But you know what? The White House would be upset with them if they did it. So they didn't. And that's on the White House's fault. No, you're a journalist. You're supposed to report things, not just tell stories based on your assumptions. It used to be if you told a reporter that you can't report on something, that would energize them to report on it. But now they've been reduced to stenographers. They don't chase a story. They tell a story, or they repurpose it from another story. This is actually the biggest political story of a generation, but they avoided it because they didn't want to feel ashamed about it. And I get how they want to move on. Who wouldn't? When a criminal is arrested, he'd love everyone to move on. But the criminal doesn't get to decide when you move on. We do. And again, this cover-up merits the kind of scrutiny that should have been there in the first place if the party had simply done the work at the start, paid attention to the voters and not to the activists, stopped indulging the false promise of identity politics and actually looked outward at the world. They wouldn't be in this problem. They're still in this problem.
So, Joey, I remember the Democrats doing everything they could to not have a primary process. They were keeping candidates off the ballot, using lawfare to go against RFK Jr. So the Obama aides trying to argue that it was just all Joe Biden and not the Democratic Party and the DNC doing this seems a little bit of a rewrite of history.
Yeah, that's what's so funny about them getting upset at David Hogg for running primary. It's like you've always had your thumb on the scale. That's your problem. That's why you don't have a deep bench, because you've gotten in between anyone who could. I mean, could you imagine someone taking the Democrat Party by storm the way Trump took the Republican Party by storm in 2016? The way it exists now, it probably couldn't happen. And most Republicans would sit there and say that's the best thing that ever happened to the party. It was the only thing that could have saved it from the Bush years and the fizzle out of the Tea Party. But as far as Biden coming back out there, I mean, I wonder if Trump sent him a gift basket or, because this is the best thing that could happen. There are a lot of headlines right now. Pakistan and India, there's Ukraine and Russia. There are a lot of things that Democrats could pretend to be upset about and say that President Trump isn't doing well. But instead, their podcast and their biggest television show are talking about Biden again.
Harold, I know that you have been a proponent of moving on from the Bidens for a long time. They were back this week. Your thoughts on them getting back on the national stage and telling this story this way?
It's good to be back around the table. I think you said it well. He lost the race. I think one of the reasons he's probably out these days is because Biden, that is because the books are coming out and he wants to show that he was not out of it. He said when he ran in 2020, Greg, that he would be a transitional figure. Then he wanted to beat Donald Trump and move the country to a new generation of leadership. And I think a lot of people took him at his word, and that didn't happen. I think Democrats now, I wouldn't respond to him at all. I think that those guys out there with the podcast, they seem like they got a good thing going. I'd be talking about issues. I mean, what are the priorities of the Democratic Party? We're about to engage in a real debate around taxes. Who do we want to cut taxes for? How are we going to stimulate Main Street business growth? Who do we want to raise taxes on if we have to raise taxes to pay for these things? President Trump has talked about the need and perhaps the reasons behind taxing people who are earning multiples of millions of dollars a year to help pay down the debt and do the things we have to do to provide no taxes on tips and no taxes on overtime. Those are the things that would be most useful to talk about if you're a Democrat. And if President Biden wants to continue to go on shows to help himself, I think one of the guys there at the end said this is all about Biden and not about anything else. Let him do that. That'll run its course. Let us go forward with a set of ideas and what our priorities are, laying it out for the country.
So, Rosanna, the Bidens are not the only problem brewing inside the Democratic Party. You also have a number of people on the far left, and you have James Carville, who sees himself as more of a centrist, telling him that they need to get out. Let's take a listen.
God, these people are just helpless. They cannot be helped. There's nothing you can do to help them. They don't want to be helped. And if they had any guts, they'd start their own political party and get out of ours. I'm sorry.
So he's specifically referring to people like Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's been campaigning with Bernie Sanders, may run for president. So they've got some big issues to work out.
They're still digesting the election. They still can't believe that the American public went in there at a time when their eggs were too high, their gas was too high, and they was watching their neighborhoods change with the influx of migrants. And so they don't know how to react to that. But the Bidens now, they're just trying to save their legacy. They're trying to get out in front of all these books that are going to drop in the next 2 weeks. Jake Tapper is defending his book, which I think is going to be pretty explosive. He said he spoke to 200 people who had a lot to say in the White House. They're all Democrats. They're all Biden lovers. But that's not enough for Joe Biden. She thinks that you have to be in, I guess, her bedroom watching Joe work so hard while she read a book.
Well, I think it's funny that the arsonists now, Joey, are the ones who are coming to save the day on this, saying, look at all these things that were happening that we never wanted to talk about until we could make money on books.
Yeah, and all the people that are saying that now were the ones that were gaslighting us.
Yeah.
That were telling us what we were seeing was not what we were really seeing.
Yeah,
kind of the
cheap
same
fakes.
thing with the riots, mostly peaceful. Joe Biden was mostly sentient.
Not
you
only
know?
that, he was running circles around his staff.
Yes.
So we'll see
He
if they
should hire
stay on the stage.
Karine Jean-Pierre to go out and be a spokesperson.
I think
for him.
she's done with him as well. So they're having a rough time keeping some friends. All right.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.